every parent, every family has to find their formula with sleep, and for us with food that will stick and that will last and keep it joyful and keep you as the heads of household, as the leaders of the family, also in your inspiration point. It's giving yourself that grace or that space, whether it's the box mac and cheese or it's school lunch for me, to really make it work for your family so you can keep it joyful.
Welcome to Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. I'm your host, Nikki Sizemore, and in this podcast, we explore the rituals, traditions, and cultural influences around food and how food connects us and also sometimes disconnects us to our minds, our bodies, our spirits, the earth, and our communities. This is a space dedicated to bringing more presence, ease, and joy into the process of feeding ourselves. Let's dive in. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the show, and welcome to season 4. It feels so good to be back. As you probably know by now, this podcast is really one of my most favorite things that I do. And it was lovely to take a break this summer, but I'm back with a great episode for you. And the timing is perfect because we're talking about back to school and how we feed our families and ourselves as our schedules get busier and busier. I'm speaking today with Sarah Copeland, who is an award-winning food writer. She's the author of 4 cookbooks, including Instant Family Meals, Every Day is Saturday, Feast, and the Newlywed Cookbook. She was the host of the Food Network series Every Day is Saturday, and her work regularly appears in top publications such as the New York Times and Food and Wine. Sarah also publishes the fabulous Substack newsletter, Edible Living, which I hope you'll go check out. I've known Sarah for a long time. In fact, we were trying to get this podcast, or at least to record something together, for like 6 months. And I'm so glad it happened when it did, because as I mentioned, we're diving into back to school. But more than that, we're exploring our very different approaches to how we feed our families, especially as, school starts and our routines get a little bit more cemented. And what I really love is that Sarah and I have a totally different approach to how we feed our families. We have a very similar value system, I'd say, but the actual tips and techniques we employ are pretty different because every family is unique and every family is different. There is no right or wrong way to do this, you guys. There's just a way that works for you and for your unique family. So I hope you'll walk away inspired, maybe with a tip or two, but I also want you to feel empowered that you're doing great just as you're doing. Sarah and I talk about our morning routines, breakfast. We get into school lunches, our dinner strategies, and how that is so different for her and I. We also talk about the nuances of feeding kids, not just kind of what they eat, but how we empower them to know their own bodies and to choose foods that feel good for them. Before we dive in, I just want to say thank you so much for being here. Thank you for listening to this podcast and supporting this work. It is such a joy to offer you guys this content. And if you ever have ideas for topics you'd like me to cover, definitely drop me a comment. You can support this work by leaving a rating in your podcast app. You can share it with your friends and family. You can also become a subscriber to the Mind, Body, Spirit, Food newsletter, where I share weekly recipes, tips, and I dive into these topics even deeper. If you become a paid subscriber for just a couple of dollars a month, you support all of this work. This is ad-free work, and it could not happen without paid subscribers. I am so deeply grateful for all of you. As a paid subscriber, you get access to the full recipe archive and to other bonus perks. All right, my friends, let's get into the show. Welcome to the show, Sarah. It is so good to finally catch up. I feel like we've been trying to make this happen for so long, and I'm so glad that it's happening today.
Me too. Thank you, Nikki. I've known you for so long, and it's great to be face to face again after seeing all the amazing things you've done this summer and this whole year.
Likewise.
On your Substack and with the family.
And it's funny because we're both from Illinois. We were just talking about that before we started recording. And we both live in the Hudson Valley. And I think we both have children the same age. I have a 9-year-old and a 14-year-old. Are yours
That's exactly right. Yeah. Greta's going to turn 14 in November and my son is 9. Exactly Amazing. Right. Yeah.
Well, I think today's topic, I can't wait to dive into this with you. We're going to talk about everything back to school. But before we dive in, I'm going to ask you the first question that I ask all of my guests so that we can get to know you a little bit more. And that is, what is your cultural upbringing and how has that influenced your relationship to food?
My parents are both from farming families in the Midwest. So my dad was raised in Missouri on what would probably be considered a biodynamic, organic, non-monoculture, polyculture farm. So they, had 10 fruit trees and berry brambles and a garden and a couple of cows and a few different kinds of animals. My mom was raised on a farm in Iowa that was more like a complete monoculture, but they did, corn and soybeans and big tractors and 30 head of cattle or 100 head of cattle, I don't remember, tons of chickens and pigs. And so when they met and moved to Illinois to a more suburban family upbringing, it was sort of a mix of these farming backgrounds of, having fresh food at your fingertips to the ease for both of my parents to suddenly be able to go to the grocery store and buy something fresh without slaughtering the chicken and wringing its neck and pulling its. So that's kind of a long intro, but just to say that there's a farm family deep inside of me, but then I was kind of raised in suburban with a physician for father, a nurse for mother. So it was a mix of very health forward, but also a sense of a freedom of indulgence that came, I think, from farm upbringing because everybody worked hard. And so there's a lot of love and joy around food. And there's, I would say a balance. So I know we'll get into that, but like a lot of balance around food and non kind of headiness just came from food was just a part of everything in life. It wasn't just on the table. It was like, you had to grow it, you had to raise it and follow the story all the way through. So even though my immediate upbringing was more typical suburban American, there was always the bigger conversation around food all the time.
It's so fascinating. And I never knew that about your upbringing, but it puts all the pieces together for me. And even just seeing the garden that you grow and the way that you so naturally talk about food and approach food, all of that comes through, which is so cool. And that's why I love that question because it really makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, right? Actually, no one's ever really asked me that, which is interesting because I don't get to talk about that very often, but it definitely influences everything about what I do.
And then for your journey, if you could just summarize for people who might not know how you got into the food space yourself. Was that always something that you were aiming to do, or did that kind of come about organically or in a surprising way?
Yeah, definitely a surprising organic way. My mom did all the cooking in our household, but it was very basic, delicious, but healthy, but basic, chicken and 2 vegetables and mashed potatoes, everything from scratch. The most kind of exotic or exciting thing was, lasagna night or cashew chicken. But when I went to college, I studied journalism. And when I went to study abroad in Ireland, of all places, nobody was really talking about the food culture there being great and exciting. And it was pre the conversation around artisanal cheese makers and bread makers. But sort of on my own, I discovered that was there. And it was also the first time I was living outside of either my parents' house or a dorm, where I lived in a flat with a woman from Spain, a woman from Switzerland, and a woman from Ireland. And so we would take turns cooking our different foods, and I would make like American treats like pancakes, and the woman from Switzerland would make a potato gratin with like applesauce on the side. So we would just experiment. And then on my time off, I would kind of explore these little bakeries, and I would find a woman making brioche and putting like a perfect apricot in the middle and, that good Irish butter. And I had started to get interested. Saveur was like a part of my life. I was reading these magazines, but I didn't really have the language yet. And I kept saying like, something really serious is going on here, in the little farmers markets. And it was before I even lived in New York City and had a farmers market at my disposal. We had one in my town growing up and my mom always took us, but it wasn't like a big conversation piece, right? The way it is now. And so that was kind of my entree where I said like, something really exciting is going on where someone is learning this craft and like perfecting, like they might have 20 things at their bakery, but like that brioche is perfect over here. And then when you go over here, you're going to get this perfect little mince pie. And like really honing in on a skill and a craft, and like that it was kind of elevated to an art in cities. And also my dad loves food and restaurants as theater. So he would always take us, he would always read Chicago Magazine and say like, oh, you know, Charlie Trotter. I mean, these are old names, or Alinea, you know, like this is the big new restaurant. And once a year we would go downtown and have like one super epic, memorable meal. And so then when I moved to New York, it was just like a slow unfolding. I studied journalism. So I went and worked in magazines, and, you know, the big thing to do at night with your very little cash that you made in magazines was to go out to dinner. And, you know, you'd work till 7 or 8 or 9 at night and then go out for like a 3-course dinner and spend everything you made.
Yeah.
But just that like joy of elevating it beyond just, it's just dinner tonight.
Yeah.
So I think for me, and this will be fun to talk about with you, because I feel like you're very good at like making sure the routines happen for your family. And though this may be surprising, I'm not actually great at that, because what draws me to food is the beautiful image or the theater of it or the presentation. And so the day-to-day, like back to school is actually a great topic for us, because that is
interesting,
something that I take a lot of pride in, but it's actually a big challenge for me.
Oh, this is so juicy. There's so much that's percolating. Well, let's dive in to back to school. I think this is a good segue. And I'm going to frame this conversation for those listening. You know, Sarah and I are going to be talking about our own routines and our own, you know, hopefully offering tips and tricks, whatever that may be, as a way to provide inspiration. But I just want to make it clear that there's no right or wrong way to do parenting or to feed our children. And so I just need to make that clear. We're not going to be sharing these things as if this is like the way to do stuff. I think we're all looking to learn and evolve and get inspired from each other. And also, you know, if we had had this conversation 6 years ago when our kids were itty bitty, our lives, when we can talk about that evolution, how it's changed, but certainly things looked vastly different back then than they do now. I can
fully agree with both of those points. I think one of the things that's so exciting is to just see, even about Instagram or social media and TikTok, which I don't do, but I know TikToks filter into the rest of our world, where you see like one little hack and you're like, oh my goodness, one little hack can make a huge difference. And that's why it's so fun to have these conversations, because even one or two takeaways could really be a game changer for someone's simplicity of their morning, or a lunch packing idea that just like made your whole year a little bit breezier.
I love it. Cool. Let's start with mornings. Do you have a breakfast routine, or what does breakfast look like for you on a weekday with the kids?
Yes. Breakfast is my favorite meal of the day. It's my favorite meal to eat. It's my favorite meal to cook, or prepare, I should say, because it's not always cooked. And I never miss breakfast. And I never allow my kids to skip breakfast, even if, not that they would, because my kids are eaters, but even if I'm like, say, going to like do some intermittent fasting or something just for myself for a couple of days, I will still eat breakfast, just push it later in the day. So our morning routine is that I'm up, I can hear my kids up, I'm up a little bit before them. And although I know it's ideal to spend some time for yourself and, you know, meditate or stretch would all be great, but like my instinct is like, go to the kitchen, get us ready. So I usually go out to the garden, I pick some kale or celery leaves. I always have huge bags of lemons in the fridge, no matter what season. I actually just put some in my water. So I have this, like, one of the things I do as a prep thing on the weekend is just juice lemons and limes and put them in an old bowl jar or an old jar. And so I make my everyday green juice every morning. Often my daughter and I will drink it. Sometimes the whole family. My son loves it too, and my husband loves it. That's my fuel up so that I feel awake and alert. I'm not a coffee drinker. I don't drink a lot of caffeine. So I drink that. I drink a glass of lemon water and I make the green juice. And if it's a school morning, like we're talking about, I'll probably just put it all out on the table. So everybody has a green juice, while then I'm starting my next, whatever, breakfast parts and lunch packing at the same time. And the reason I do that is because a couple of reasons. Number one, it's so refreshing. It wakes us up. Number two, I feel like the first thing hitting my kid's system is kind of a reset, because there's lemon juice. So it's like alkaline, there's vegetables in it, but I put a little banana in it. So it has a sweetness to it. It has a frothiness. I put a little ice. So it's refreshing. You wake up. And then there's also not that pause moment of like, Mommy, what's for breakfast? I know a lot of families have kind of more of a DIY approach where like there would be box cereal and everybody grabs their own thing. But I really enjoy making breakfast. So then while they're getting their green juice and like maybe, my daughter who's entering high school, but even last year in 8th grade would be like packing up her folder because she would have done her homework upstairs in her room. So she'd be like packing her backpack. And my rule for the kids is you fill your water bottle and I will get everything else ready for you. Make sure you fill your water bottle and pack your backpack. And so then I would start to go on breakfast. And I would say 2 to 3 days a week, even during the school year, I do a hot breakfast. One of the things that's tricky for us, and you might have this with your age gap too, is that my daughter goes to school almost a full hour and a half before my son. So, and she really likes that quiet time in the morning, either just by herself or just with me. And so I try to prepare something, and this is like highly catered. And I think a lot of parents would be like, whoa, this is way too much service. And I'm just reminding that I enjoy this. This is the part of the day that I really enjoy. Is that I'll make kind of like the things she likes and then some overlap things that they both like and that my husband and I will also eat. And then my son will come down almost like an hour later. So there is a feeling for me, the first year that she went to junior high and he was in elementary and there was that hour and a half gap, it was like my efficiency brain went, whoa, this is crazy. Like this is an hour and a half of work I'm missing. This is an hour and a half of, I could be walking or exercising because he doesn't use an alarm. I don't know when he might be coming down. So it's not like I just put out a breakfast and like, Mommy's going to work or Mommy's going to a hike or something. I've kind of shifted that part of my day. Whereas like after school evening dinner is a lot less highly catered to each individual. It's just like, this is what I made for dinner. We can talk about that later. But, they know that breakfast is kind of an important thing for all of us. And I think they really enjoy that. And it's like when we chat and they tell me what they're nervous about or excited about. So I'm usually simultaneously like restaurant style kind of making 3 yogurt bowls or making 3 oatmeal bowls or putting together a plate with, 2 eggs and a couple of vegetables and toast while I'm also chopping things for lunch boxes. So I have like an island station that's not very big. I might have had all the fruit washed or I might have washed it that morning, but I'm sort of like making hot stuff, chopping things, checking on the hot stuff. And we always drink tea in the morning. Everybody in my family drinks tea in the morning. So we have the green juice, we have the tea, we have whatever food, and then lunch packing. So it sounds complicated, but actually it's not super complicated because my lunches are more simple than you would think for someone with my background. And we can get into that.
Well, before we get into that, I want to show how different, here we are, 2 people in the food industry, and it could not be more opposite because a breakfast is my least favorite meal of the day. It's like, I just don't get into it. But my husband, since I manage all of the other food and the shopping lists and things, breakfast is his meal. This is what he does.
That's great.
James and I get up at the same time. I'm like you. I start with my hot lemon water. I'm a tea drinker as well. And then him and I both have our own morning sacred practices. And he works out. I sometimes do a movement practice. I always have a meditation practice. I really need that sacred time. I'm not a very grounded individual. And I think my whole family knows that that time is really important for me to set the intention for my day. And so it took us a while for us to get there where I could acknowledge to my people how badly I needed that. And as soon as I said this, and this is now years when the kids were very little and James was really managing the kids in the morning, luckily we've been able to make that work. And there was, for a long time I was waking up super early and now I don't have to because Ella, who's same with you, she hit 6th grade. She makes her own breakfast and lunch. So she comes down and she loves her quiet time. We light up the house in the morning. We'll start a kettle of water for her, but she usually is pulling something from the freezer. That's one of our big strategies, whether it's the kids baking over the weekend or if I'm baking over the weekend. And obviously as a recipe developer, there's just a lot that ends up in the freezer.
Excess. Muffins
Always. So there's a lot of breakfasts look like that for her. She is the sweet tooth in our family. She will make like egg in a hole or scrambled eggs. She loves smoothie bowls. She does a lot of smoothie bowls. but she really manages her breakfast. She manages her lunch. Now that she's going into high school, we're going to see how that goes because I can see lunch being more difficult as her workload gets a little more intense. So we might take over
And is
that.
there an earlier start time? Because I know Greta's bus will pick up now like 40 minutes earlier. And she has said to me, and I thought this was really interesting. She came to me just the other day because we do green juice a lot and I do it mostly. But this summer, I've been on deadline for a project. And so I've been saying like, honey, can you make green juice for everybody? And she takes a lot of pride in it. And so she said to me the other day, I want to do green juice every morning again for fall. And I want to do it and pack my lunch. And I'm like, great, that would be a huge help to me.
Yeah.
And I think that's really an important leap because I know I didn't do any food preparation until high school. And I remember, just thinking that what my mom made was good and wholesome and nutritious. And like, I enjoyed it and I appreciated it. And like, I was busy with other things and I was just, low key grateful, but not like, wow, that's so amazing that she does that. But then when people ask my dad how I got into food, he always says, oh, Sarah would bring home, we had open campus at lunch. And he would say, Sarah would bring home 2 or 3 friends home from lunch because we lived like 5 minutes. And everyone was going to like Little Caesars and Taco Bell's, in the 90s and, late 90s. And so people weren't talking about how bad those foods were, but I just never really liked those foods. And so I was like, I can eat something better and healthier and feel better to go home for lunch. So my dad always says she would come home for lunch and, mother, he calls her mother would say, there's absolutely nothing in the fridge and you would figure something out. And I think that was a pride point for me as a high schooler to be like, I can figure this out. Like I can whip together this little sandwich or whatever. So I see that corner turning of like the desire to be cared for and the desire to do self-care.
Yeah.
And I think for boys too, but I do think for young girls, it's kind of an important topical moment to say like, take that time for yourself.
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't have to make your brother breakfast. Like he can make his own breakfast too. Make yourself something that makes you feel like, what a great lesson to have. Like what makes you feel good for your whole day or your whole morning until lunch? And what gets you excited about lunchtime? Like what's the one thing in there? Because I know what it is for me. Like I make, certain snacks that if I go into the studio out back that I work in, and if I go there early, I know that like, if I can come in at 10 o'clock and there's some like healthy kind of nutritious, like a Powerball or a little tiny, tiny glass of iced coffee, like that's an incentive for me. And learning those things about yourself, I think is great for kids.
We talk a lot as well about her energetic needs because Ella's a real introvert and she loves her friends and she loves her time, but school is a lot. It's a lot of energy output.
A lot of people,
and
all day.
Her time in the morning she really, I wouldn't even say she loves it. She needs it, that real quiet and that quiet meal by herself. Now, that being said, Junie, my little one, wakes up later and James cooks her a hot breakfast every day. And it's like multiple courses.
Yeah, that's like my son.
She like is just so, I mean, both of my kids love food and it's just like, so many things. But I pack her lunch. And so when she goes to junior high, she'll be in charge and she knows. And now even last year, she was in 4th grade, getting her to help out for certain lunches. She gets excited. That's the thing. Like if they're packing it, and this isn't all the time, of course, sometimes it's going to be like, oh, I got to make my lunch. But also I see they get more excited, like they're invested in what they're creating. Also, I will say this bleeds into our dinner plan. Since I know Ella is taking lunch, we often try to make extra. If it's like a pasta or a stew or a soup or something like that, so that we can pack that at least for one of the kids for lunch in the morning.
Yeah. And I think that's a super smart strategy. So, I mean, not to jump ahead to dinner, but it is kind of interesting since dinner affects your lunch. My husband works out of town in New York City 3 days a week. So one of the things I probably do talk about a fair amount in my newsletter is that like dinner shifted away from the important meal for my family, even though growing up, dinner was the meal. Dinner was the meal. Nobody missed it. We were very active. We had 4 kids. My mom was driving everywhere, but somehow, I don't know how she did it, we always had hot dinner almost all the time, the 6 of us together, or at least the 5 of us and my dad coming home like right at the beginning or towards the end of it. And even if my oldest sister who's like 8 years older than me, when she got her driver's license, even if she was like, thanks, Mom, and then I'm going to run to dance or whatever with their own car, there was always a moment where most of us were sitting eating dinner. But that's really very hard for my family because my husband's gone 3 nights a week. When he's working from home, he works long hours and late. Sometimes he'll come in for dinner and go back out to his workshop. And then I'm driving a lot. And since I'm driving both of my kids to different places and different activities, there's a fair amount of nights where dinner is just not how I imagined it would be for my family and how would be the most satisfying. So that's why I put the most energy into breakfast because it's like that hopeful moment before everybody leaves. And I have the most control, right, in that situation, which is just being honest. It's like me having control for that short period of the day, like feeling like I think there is for a certain type of parent, a sense of like mastery, like I nailed that. And then the rest of the day, I'm like, I have no control. Yeah. By dinner, I'm not probably going to nail it most of the time. But that's interesting because I think if I did more of the bigger dinner, it would make sense. When Greta was young and we lived in the city and it was just the 3 of us before Matthias was born, we did a lot more of that. And she would eat whatever I set to lunch to her little Montessori because most of those kids, it was a very multicultural neighborhood. We lived in Queens. And so there were kids from Bangladesh and kids from Turkey and kids from Japan and China and Poland and Hungary like us and Americans. And so every kid's lunch looked very vastly different. And every kid was eating whatever their parents sent them. And when we moved to upstate New York and went to public school, Greta actually came home from school in 1st grade and she said, Mommy, there's something called a meat sandwich. It's like a sandwich. It's like bread with meat. And then like you could put cheese. It was like she'd never heard of it. And she was telling me about it. That's what people eat here for lunch. Yeah. And I was sending her like quinoa salads and like corkscrew pasta, whatever, leftovers, or like we'd made Hungarian goulash or, something Hungarian. And then she has that in her lunch. So she was like, it's really cool. You can just like pick it up. And I was like, okay, would you like to have like a turkey sandwich for lunch? So like for that year, she was really interested in that. And then we kind of like fell off of sandwiches. But, it's interesting because it does evolve. But that was like a novelty for her for that year. And then lunch became this bigger, more complicated thing because it was like, oh, and then Matthias is more influenced by his friends around him. Yeah. So actually, Matthias gets school lunch several times a week. So that's a huge, that's a whole topic. That's a huge burden off of me. It's also an emotional, I had to come to terms with it because I know what school lunch is at his school. And for him, it's very social. His friends get it. Yeah. And during COVID in our district, they really encouraged everyone to get it because so many kids needed it. Yeah. And I really feel that that's super smart. And it relieved such a burden on me of like making sure enough of these certain types, like he's a fruitarian. He would just eat all fruit. And for some reason, the kinds of meats they serve, like chicken fingers or turkey tacos, he says turkey tacos with turkey taco meat. He likes it. He likes the feeling of like going and getting his tray and being in control. So there was like a little period for me of adjusting to, I think this is a good move for us. This is a good move for him. He likes it. He feels connected to his community.
I think that social aspect is so important to give them the agency to decide. So my kids cannot eat public lunch. Ella used to, but neither of my kids can eat gluten and makes both girls sick. So we don't have a choice. And then like not to discount the fact that it is a massive burden to make school lunch, especially if, am really privileged to have the financial ability to buy fresh food and to cook fresh food and to have the time to do so. But it's a big time commitment, although we have found ways to alleviate that. And so Ella, packs her own lunch, and most often that is hot pasta in a thermos. Neither of my kids eat sandwiches. It's so funny unless they're cooked. So she'll literally make a grilled cheese with tomato and wrap it up and bring it to lunch. That is usually like the extent. She is not very adventurous. And again, it's like I had to take my own sense of identity away from what she feels good eating every day at lunch. And
I think that's really important because I've had some friends who have the privilege that we're talking about, and they're very, very strict about the standard of their kids' foods. And I would say, yes, also, I feel that way. But to train our kids to say, that's disgusting, that's bad quality, that's going to make you sick, is such a social concern for me of like othering. And I'm really proud that, you know, my kids definitely understand quality and they understand the farming system and they understand the privilege of how it is to eat a ton of produce and organic food. And when we go to the grocery shop together and they see like what's in our cart, often when we're checking out, people will be like, wow, that's a lot of fruits and vegetables. But also you see the bill and it's expensive, right? And so we talk about, you know, especially with waste, we talk about like, hey, the waste feels really bad to mommy right now because, you know, daddy and I had to go out and earn the money to do that, to buy that. We had to drive there. We had to put it in our car. I had to touch it 5 or 6 times between the conveyor, the car, back into the house, into the grocery, and so we've explained that chain to them so many times, not to mention all the people involved before we got to the food, the farmers, et cetera, to understand the privilege that it is, but also to never other people who must rely on breakfast or lunch at school. And so I think it was a really smart thing that our district kind of said, like, hey, the government is paying for school lunch for these 2 years post-COVID to help everyone kind of recover. And if your kid is able and it works for your family, like it helps us if they all just go get lunch. And so I was like, yeah, we can do that. And then it was such a relief, like a certain number of days a week. I found out by the time we were at the school, what's it called? Field day, when you go and have lunch with your kid. And I was like, you know, I saw him get a chocolate milk and the lady was like, he gets that every day. And I was like, okay, good to know. But, you know, instead of old me, like my daughter at this age would have been like, honey, we can't be having chocolate milk every day. That's just a lot of unnecessary sugar. You know, just to think like they are very active kids. I'm very tightly controlling a lot of things. And they also just want to be normal kids. And I know you are big on this and we always talk about this. Having mealtime not have any elements of shame attached to it is so important. And so I've said a few times, like, you know, you're at the age where you can make a choice for how food makes you feel in your body and what you want your like performance in life to be. Do you want to feel energetic? Do you want to feel great? Do you want to feel, you know, and sometimes I do that too. Sometimes you just want to like enjoy that thing.
That's how we approach it with our kids. And we've had to, because both of them were getting sick from food. Ella had to cut out gluten when she was 13. That was such a learning experience for all of us because I had an eating disorder in my late teens and early 20s. And I'm very sensitive about trying to tell my kids what's healthy and what's not. I'm always telling my kids, well, because I hate the word healthy. And I'm like, well, that might be healthy for one body and it could be unhealthy for another body. So what you think of as healthy might not be the case. Like I'm always trying to like cut down their assumptions of what is, also because they have this idea of that healthy, like they have a negative connotation towards healthy. But for Ella, it was like, okay, you're feeling this way. I had to let her go through that journey. And she's the one who it took her 4 to 6 months. And then finally it was after Thanksgiving and we had cut out gluten completely. My in-laws were so wonderful. And she came to me crying after that meal. And she said, Mommy, it's the gluten. And of course I had suggested that could be the case because my little one has never been able to tolerate gluten and I can't either. But she had to come to terms on her own. It was very empowering for her to know, okay, I'm doing this for me. I'm doing this because of the way this food makes me feel. Just always having that conversation with them. Well, how does it make you feel? I think it's been really empowering and they really trust themselves. And they both are really learning to know, I think, like what makes them feel good and what doesn't make them feel good. And that extends beyond just food. You know, Ella's entering high school. And so we've been talking a lot about how we hold things in our body and how pain might feel in our body and how we can release that. And so sometimes food can be a way for us to start that conversation, but then maybe it's an emotion that you're holding in your body. Your stomach hurts. Like, okay, so my little one has a lot of tummy aches or she has in the past. And my conversation always starts like, do you think it's something you ate or do you think it's something you feel? And so
that's a great question.
Having to allow them to go inside themselves and to discern, like, actually, I think maybe it's something I feel, or I just feel uncomfortable. Okay, do you think we should move? Do you think you're hungry? Like asking them the questions so that they can start to get to know what these signals are. Because even for Junie, when she was little, her stomach is like very sensitive, but she couldn't distinguish what hunger felt like and what a painful, she ate gluten felt like. It both felt painful. Hunger pains feel painful for a reason. So I think, it's great to give our kids agency in these things. And we're the parents. And there's no right or wrong way to parent or to feed kids. I truly believe that. But you get to decide what's right for your family. As a parent, it also means that, yes, you can have opinions for your family. And yes, you can do whatever is right for your family. And we can ourselves be non-judgmental and teach our kids to not be judgmental of other families that do things differently, because that's perfect for them. That's right for them, right?
Right. And I agree with you that, the sooner they get that agency to like understand these different emotions and feelings in their body, the better. Because, when the kids were a little bit younger, when Andros, my husband, first started leaving 3 days a week, he leaves for 3 consecutive days. He doesn't come back and forth. He leaves and he's gone for 3 days. It was stressful to me, the idea of like not having the family unit at dinner. And so dinner became sort of emotional when he was there. It was like very important for me that he sit down and sit still and nobody get up from the table, because it was like all I had that was a repeat of my childhood dinner time. And so I was putting like extra pressure on it. And so food wasn't tasting as good. And, kids were getting like, kind of like this food moment wasn't like the beautiful food moments we were having when they were much younger, before COVID, before he took this job, before like, things shifted a lot for our family during that time. And I had to stop myself and be like, I could create discomfort around just simply feeling stress while you eat at all could be a really negative shift around something that I value so highly.
Yeah.
And it's coming from a place of love, of like wanting that togetherness, but I'm expressing it in a way of stress for myself that could affect everybody. So, just stepping back from what you were saying to say that like, I think we are now in a time where so many people recognize how food is so layered and our emotions around food is so related to our past, our upbringing, experiences like you had,
What is as far as your dinner strategy then? So for us, dinner is my sacred. That is my sacred. I love dinner. And I would say during the weekday doesn't mean it's fancy. And actually the routine I like jot out a rough menu on the back of my grocery list. I have to have a rough plan. Otherwise I get lost in and, I get the 5:30 standing at the fridge, like, what am I making? But it's a very rough thing. And we always have, I would say during the school year, like one night is Mexican. We make enchiladas, tacos, something like that. One night is Italian, pasta. That helps me to be like, one night is a soup. My whole family loves soup. That's a strategy I use just to simplify, and knowing that I can, slot in a million different things within those broad categories according to what's in season. And then, of course, I'm testing recipes all the time. So a lot of the time, my family just has to eat what I'm testing for the second time. But we're very lucky because my husband and I both work from home. The kids' activities have been such that we are able to eat together every night for dinner. But like I said, we never eat breakfast together. So it's just so interesting how this plays out. For you, since you're shuttling the kids, what does dinner strategy look like for you? How do you find more ease?
Last year, we kind of got into a rhythm because it was the first year that both kids had we didn't do a lot of sports for my son because my daughter was very scheduled per her request. She did violin and she was very active in theater and dance and the kinds of activities that required like many nights a week. And so we didn't start sports for him until much later. We were like, we're not doing anything scheduled for you till you're like 7. And then, last year when he was 8, it was like several nights a week of soccer and several nights a week of martial arts. And so we knew what nights they were. And it was the first year that felt really like, okay, we have a routine. So on Monday nights, my boys are together and they go to soccer. So I do like a really early dinner because the weekends we eat out a fair amount. I would say like 1 to 2 meals on the weekends we eat out. Maybe it's a dinner, maybe it's a brunch. If we go out for a brunch on the weekend, I'm not making like a full dinner that night. It's like we're having salad or we're having, leftovers, or everybody in this family loves fruits. We do a lot of like snack trays with fruits and vegetables and cheeses. And so moving into like Sunday, we've probably eaten out either brunch or dinner. So Monday is like the first night of the week. I'm like, okay, I'm going to make a nice, wholesome, hot, delicious dinner. And we have a tricky thing because my husband is pescatarian. My daughter only eats chicken and fish. My son loves meat, and I try to avoid gluten. So it's tricky. And I never thought we'd be that kind of picky family because my kids love everything. But Greta's made this ethical choice. Andras never ate meat, only recently started eating fish via our marriage. And Machas just absolutely loves like a steak or a burger. And so it's only really in the last couple of years we've had this kind of catered situation. So it sounds finicky, but it's not easy. I'm not going to lie. It's not easy, but it has only been a couple of years. And I mostly eat everything except for I would rather have rice and, a gluten-free option. So Monday night, I might make a polenta with like chicken meatball, which 3 of us will eat. And then I'll put an egg on the one for Andras. And I feed the boys early. I try to feed Greta early. And then she and I have like an hour before I take her to ballet. So we just eat super early on Monday nights. Yeah. Tuesdays and Thursdays, we have martial arts. So we eat after. And she has activities she can walk to or that are right here. Wednesday is our we're going to have ballet this year. But last year was what we called it Watching Wednesday. And this is like a day we all look forward to. Not because my husband's out of town, we look forward to it, but because he's out of town, I don't cook on Wednesday night. So it's my treat night. It's either we get pizza or we go out for tacos and we're allowed to, finish our homework, watch TV, watch a show, watch a movie together. We just have like a very easy night. It's midweek. It's my second day of solo parenting every week. And we just keep it super easy. That Wednesday, knowing in midweek I don't have to cook dinner really keeps me going on dinner. Yeah. And then Thursday, again, pretty simple dinner. And then by Friday, it's always more of like a snack dinner, low key. My daughter has ballet for like 3 hours, then goes to youth group at her church. So it's always just me and my boys on Friday night. And we try to keep it not feeling like, like it's going to be more and more of that starting high school where she's gone. Yeah. And again, it feels like the quiet little dinner table and it's Friday night. So maybe we'll like grill sausages on the open fire outside, or we'll make a little snack tray and sit outside and picnic, or we'll go to a creek and the 3 of us will swim and take a picnic. So Fridays are kind of like very easy, but kind of mobile meal. So while it is not highly routine, it's actually pretty routine. I know the context of the meal for each night, and it's less about what the meal is, but it's how the meal has to be served. Yeah. Because of our schedule.
You adapt. Yeah. Yeah. That reminds me of our weekend. We have 2 very fun routines, and one is Friday night date night for my husband and I. And we started this during the pandemic, and the kids love it just as much as we do because they get to choose what they have for dinner. And it's like Bach's macaroni and cheese or a frozen pizza, like whatever, they get to choose. And I love that for them because I'm making from scratch every other meal. And they watch a movie, and then James and I make a fun dinner and we have that. And then our Sunday night supper, and that's the only meal when I was growing up that my whole family ate together usually because we had such busy schedules that our Sunday night supper is still, it's just like we always eat with candles and the kids do the dishes. And it's just like we're always home, and that's my favorite night of the week. But that's because that's what I grew up with, right? And so that's the tradition. And I think whatever the tradition is, whether that's a snack tray, I love that. Or we do a lot of buildables during the week. So I liked how you mentioned that, because then everyone gets to assemble their own. And I'm a big fan of family style plating because I think when the kids get to choose what goes on their plates, that's great.
And that's kind of like our Monday. Like it might be polenta. The next week it's a rice bowl. The next time it's a grain bowl. And everybody, last year specifically, we did shift a lot into like, here are like 3 or 4 toppings I made throughout the week. Like I made eggplant parm for my husband, or I have meatballs, or, we always have really good fresh local eggs. So I might put out like 5 or 6 things, which is Andras's mother's style. She cooks 3 days a week. She cooks a lot. And then for 3 days, we eat everything out of the fridge. And then she'll cook 3 days a lot where she's in the kitchen. She's shaving carrots. She's slicing things. She's peeling potatoes. And there's like soup, and there's a gratin, and there's this and that. And we have like those hot meals when they're fresh. When we go over to Hungary where she lives, and where we lived for a short time 2 years ago, like in my kids' 7th and 2nd grade years. And I really learned like that's her strategy. And Andras said she did that always because she worked full time and had 3 kids and her husband worked full time. So I've started to do a little bit more of that. We're not a huge leftover family, but like, here's what we've made.
Yeah.
Here's the base thing. And we need to eat all this before it goes bad and before we can eat out again. And I do think that choosing for yourself is really cool. And, you know, it was interesting because you talked about Sunday supper and we've tried 3 things. And I'm just going to mention them for the listeners because they've been really fun for us, even though they haven't lasted for us, they could work for other people. And we tried them at different points in our life. So there was one year where I tend to get bored with dinner, even though I've written, you know, hundreds of recipes like you and several cookbooks. You know, everybody gets bored with dinner sometimes unless you're like, my brother is like highly passionate about cooking dinner. And he sends me pictures of what he made. And I'm just like, you are next level. But, you know, he's rolling pasta with his toddler and his preschooler, like on a Tuesday night. But he and his wife both are highly passionate about food and they both work from home. So it's like a totally different. My husband put the food in front of me. He's not passionate about buying it, cooking it. He doesn't want to pick it. He just wants to eat it. So it's a different, you know, situation. But my kids are passionate about cooking it. So 3 things we've tried. 2 years ago, we did Eat Around the World. So every Friday we picked a different country and we cooked a lot of food that night that we would eat through the weekend. So we did Italy, we made pasta, we did, you know, of course, Hungarian, we did Mexican, which we eat a lot of Mexican food also. We all love Mexican food. We all love tacos. We did sushi one night and then we did Russia and it broke us. Like it broke us. We made like pierogies and stuffed cabbage and it was like super labor intensive, but delicious. And then, so that lasted like maybe like 8 or 9 weeks and it kind of rebooted us. And then last year I sat at dinner one night like, hey, you know, starting to hear a little grumbling about the types of food or like a little monotony maybe, where it's not always like a hot, luscious dinner. I put all the energy into breakfast. I said, how about we all take a night of the week where we cook? And Machas, who's very organizationally minded, made a schedule based on everybody's activities. And he picked a night he would cook and Greta picked a night. And it could be anything. It could be boxed mac and cheese. But because they were started with such enthusiasm, it started out with, you know, here, mommy, can you get these things at the store? And it was like, you know, Greta wanted to do omelets and frittatas and souffles, kinds of things. She wanted to do quiche, which took a lot of time. She loves eggs and she's our mostly vegetarian who also eats some chicken once in a while. So that was like a huge relief for me. And even a few weeks of that. And then Machas wanted to do tacos and he wanted to do steak tacos, chicken and shrimp for daddy. And so, you know, and once he got the hang of doing good tacos, I was like, sweet, all I have to do, of course, we have stacks of prepared tortillas, but then it opened up a space for me to feel inspired. So I was like, you know what? I can make tortillas. If all I have to do tonight is show up and make tortillas and buy a bag of masa, like that's something I've never had time to do since I was first married. So here I am like making fresh tortillas and he's doing the rest. And it just, I think anytime a family can kind of shift the burden, if it's a burden of a certain type of meal or bring in new inspiration from someone else. And then, you know, that only lasted for about 2.5 months. And then the other thing I sometimes do when I'm just kind of flat is I just take like the newest cookbooks that have come in and I say, everyone pick 3 things that inspire you.
Oh, that's like fun. Yeah.
And they flag things. And sometimes I'm like, whoa, I'm not, you know, that's complicated. But, you know, it just kind of gets everyone to feel involved. And I think that does help quite a bit.
Well, thank you so much. I feel like what I love about this conversation is like just that we do things very differently. Everything is just tailored to what's right for the family and for what's right for your kids and what's right for you as the cook. If you are the listener and you're the cook in your family, like you're part of that equation. And putting that burden of having to do everything one way, that's not a fair burden to place on yourself. So I hope this conversation gives you the freedom to either shift the burden or to make it easier or do a snack tray night or a clean out the fridge night or maybe start a menu planning or whatever the tips may be. I do have one last question for you, Sarah. I want to thank you for your time. I want to direct everybody to your beautiful Substack newsletter and your Instagram and all that. You can tell everybody all about that. Before you do, If it's your last meal on earth right now, what would it be?
It would probably be like one of my mom's classic dinners. So like, you know, I'm not a pork chop. I'm not a real pork eater, but she would just make like delicious pork chops or like a grilled chicken, and always her like perfect, flawless, creamy mashed potatoes with a little dollop of butter in the middle and corn on the cob and a big chunk of watermelon, and her chocolate cake with chocolate frosting, which is just like pillowy and light. She made it for all of our birthdays. I think I would just go to like that comfort food of like my mother caring for me, and not fancy, just like classic comforting flavors. And I just want to say in partying, because what you said, just to echo it, last thing, that, you know, catering to your own family, I think is such an important concept. And one of the things our very first pediatrician ever said to us when we were talking about sleep, but it relates to food so perfectly as well, if you make the translation. We were talking about how, you know, we're night owls, and my daughter seems to like want to take like a 4-hour nap, but she stays up late. And he said, you know what? I have some patients who are rock musicians, and their daughter is up till like 3 a.m. and you would think like that's the worst thing ever for a kid. But like the whole family sleeps until 11 and, you know, they cook and they do this and they do that. And like they're on the road, and he's like, that kid comes here and she's healthy and she's balanced and well adjusted. And it like blew my mind, right? Like that just sounds like unbelievable that you would ever keep a kid up. And he said, you know, every parent, every family has to find their formula with sleep, and for us with food that like, that will stick and that will last and keep it joyful and keep you as the heads of household, as the leaders of the family, also in your inspiration point, you know? So I think there was a mentality for years of like, you got to get that hot dinner on the table every night or whatever. But for me, like I shifted to breakfast. For you, it's dinner. It's giving yourself that grace or that space, whether it's the box mac and cheese or it's school lunch for me, to really make it work for your family so you can keep it joyful. I think it's super important. So
I love that. I love that. Every family has a formula, and every formula is going to be different. Brilliant.
Right. And they're all okay, you know?
And they're all okay. Okay. Where can people find you really quick before we sign off?
Oh, sure. And Instagram, I'm at Edible Living, and at Substack, my Substack is also called Edible Living. And I publish weekly, lots of recipes, lots of travel stories, lots about our life in Hungary. And I have 4 cookbooks, the Newlywed Cookbook. Every day, Saturday, I happen to have in front of me. It's a very messy, tattered copy. Instant Family Meals and Feasts, which is my vegetarian cookbook.
Thank you so much, Sarah.
Thanks for having me, Nikki. What a treat.
Got to catch up.
I know. I'm going to come to your house for dinner, though.
Okay. I'll be there for breakfast. That sounds perfect.
Great. Sounds good.
Thank you so much for listening. If this work resonates with you in any way, you can support it by leaving a review or comment or sharing it with friends. Also, you can sign up for the newsletter, Mind, Body, Spirit, Food. And by becoming a paid member for just $5 a month, you help fund this entire project. Thank you so much to all of you who are already subscribed, especially to those paid subscribers. This work could not happen without you. I'm Nikki Sizemore, and as always, remember to nourish yourself with intention and love.